I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a man that manages money. He is a Wall Street expert, a financial expert. He is a bond expert, as he wrote this book just a few years ago. It's titled The Coming Bond Market Collapse. And while there's no place better to start than an expert on everything, including bonds, than the default of Puerto Rican bonds, Michael Pento of Pento Portfolio Strategies. Thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. Puerto Rican bonds, the dead canary on the floor of the coal mine.
Yeah, I'll tell you the most salient take that I have from this Puerto Rican default. You know, they only have $70 billion in debt. I say only. That's only about 70%, 68% of their GDP. Yet their bond yields hit 1,600%, Greg. Why did their bond yield hit 1,600%? You know, if you compare Puerto Rico to Japan, it's really not that bad of a case. Japan's debt is 250% debt to GDP. What's the big trenchant difference is that Puerto Rico doesn't have a central bank. The Fed can't buy their debt. Obviously, they can't sell it to the ECB. So here's the takeaway you have to get from the situation. Without central banks monetizing most, and in some cases all, issued sovereign debt, everybody, every developed world nation would look like Puerto Rico, which just defaulted on almost $500 million in debt earlier this week.
How long can they do this? I mean, Puerto Rico is
I'll tell you.
Puerto Rico is the canary in the coal mine, and they're the guys that can't print money. So they're all of a sudden, your debt comes to market for real, and their default is real. When does this happen for everybody else? When does the default happen for everybody else?
When you are forced to rely on your tax base to service your debt, you get 1,600% interest rates. So look, listen, verify everything I say. Go to Bloomberg, check it out. You're getting an interest payment of 1,600%, which basically means you're going to get a default on your bonds. You're not going to get anything close to that. They're going to default on most, if not all, of that debt. That's yielding 1,600%. Central bankers will continue, and central planners will continue manipulating markets until they reach their inflation targets. And once inflation hits those targets, I believe it's going to go intractable. It's going to rise without the ability to rein that inflation in. You're going to have spiking bond yields and collapsing markets everywhere. They are trapped. Their game is ending, and Puerto Rico is that canary or that red herring. It's the canary in the coal mine, as you said.
How long can this go on for? When do the central bankers blow their... Basically, what you're saying is that they'll blow the currency up, and thus they'll blow the bond markets up right along with it.
You know what? Let's stay with Japan. So I call him Hiroshima Kuroda, but the central banker there is Haruko Kuroda. And Abe is obviously the prime minister of Japan. Last week, they made a decision to not increase the annual rate of, they call it QQE, qualitative and quantitative easing, as if adding another Q makes it more palatable. So they didn't increase their 80 trillion yen per annum bond buying manipulation counterfeiting scheme. And because he didn't increase it, not that he stopped buying the debt, not that he started selling the debt, the fact that he didn't increase his bond buying scheme more than 80 trillion yen, the Nikkei Dow dropped 1,100 points in the following 2 trading days. This is an example of how dangerous and how manipulated markets are. They can't get out. These central planners cannot get out. And even a hint that maybe someday they have to stop causes asset prices to absolutely collapse.
Yeah, so do you think we coming to the end? Some people say that they can keep doing this indefinitely. The central banks, they can just print money, and you say
they can do it. They can do it indefinitely until inflation becomes intractable. You know, in the United States, we're running up on 90 months, virtually 90 months of 0% interest rates. And what do we have for that, Greg? Do you know Q4 GDP was 1.4%? That's bad enough. Q1 GDP is a zero handle, 0.5%. That's what we get for blowing up the Fed's balance sheet to $4.5 trillion. That's an increase of $3.7 trillion. That's what we get for manipulating bond yields down to 0% for 90 months. we're virtually in a recession. And by the way, you know, a lot of the carnival barkers that dominate Wall Street, they'll tell you that, of course, Q2 is going to be a massive rebound from the horrible winter we had in Q1. This is the reason why we had a 0.5%. The only problem, 0.5% in GDP print, the only problem with that is we had a really mild winter. It was one of the mildest winters on record. So we actually pulled forward demand from Q2. And that's why if you look at the April, which is Q2, April, May, June, look at April ISM. 50.8, virtually a recession. Chicago PMI, Philly Fed, contraction mode. I tell you, this economy is absolutely, if not in a recession, in an out-and-out recession, virtually a flat-line, dead-line economy. Zero. It's a 0% world, and that's all we've gotten for 90 months of ZIRP.
What do you think they're going to do when they realize? John Williams says they're going to they're going to recalculate the first print, and they'll recalculate that down. That'll be negative or close to negative, if not negative.
It'll revise negative.
He'll revise it down negative, yes. And then he says almost the same thing you do. We are in or are going to be in soon, or we're already in a recession. He thinks we're already in a recession right here and now if the numbers were not cooked. What do you think their reaction is going to be in an election year to, oh my gosh, we're in a recession? Are they going to print money are we getting the helicopter money? Because that's what I've been hearing about.
Let's define helicopter money, Greg. Let's just define what that is. So right now they're going through the banking system. They are buying assets that sit on banks' balance sheets with the hope that banks go out and buy more debt and rebuy their stock and buy more stocks. That's sort of what's happening now, but a lot of that excess reserves is laying fallow at the central bank's balance sheet. What you're talking about, and I think that's probably where we're headed, is circumventing the banking system. In other words, what the government will do is come out with a huge tax cut or a huge stimulus program and have the central bank, and you have to change the law for this because right now they can't do it, they have to change the law but allow the Fed to directly buy newly issued debt from the Treasury. I think that's where we're headed in Japan. I think that's where we're headed in China, Europe, and in the United States. And then you'll have an explosion of fiat currency. You'll directly be monetizing debt. You don't have to worry about the banking system increasing money supply. You're directly going to increase it from central bank to the Treasury. And then you're going to have stagflation on an epic proportion scale. Because guess what, Greg? Growth doesn't come from counterfeiting. If it was the case that you could engender growth from printing money, then Zimbabwe and Argentina and Bulgaria, go look them up. These are some of the most worst cases of inflation ever. They would have been bastions of economic growth, but they were economic chaotic debacles, complete disasters. You can't improve productivity by wrecking your currency, and you can't increase labor force participation rates by wrecking the value of your dollar. And speaking of the dollar, I just got to talk. This is so crucial for your listeners. You know, people that are ardent fans of yours and have listened to my interviews and others, they have saved a lot of money, and they maybe even made a lot of money. I'll give you something I said about 2 weeks ago. I said, watch the dollar index. Watch that 94 on the DXY. You know, Greg, in the past year, that 94 on the DXY, the dollar index, it bounced off that level 6 times. I said, watch that level. If it breaks that level, we can go all the way down to 80. And that's where the dollar broke out in, I think it was early 2014. I'm not quite sure about that, but I think it was early 2014, where the dollar just screamed higher from 80 all the way up to 100 on the DXY. Guess what? 6 times it bounced there. It's now clearly broken through. And I'll tell you why, and it's so crucial for your listeners to understand this. Your audience has to grasp this. Why is the dollar breaking 94 and heading back to 80? And if you can get that trade right, by the way, you can make tons of money, as my clients are doing in precious metals and gold and silver and shorting the dollar and actually even shorting the stock market. I'll tell you this. Real interest rates are the ultimate barometer as to where currencies are headed. And you know which nation on planet Earth has the lowest level of real interest rates? That's nominal rates minus inflation. It's the United States of America. We're at minus 1.7%. If you take a 1-year note, subtract inflation, you get minus 1.7. Everybody says, well, Japan's horrific. Yeah, they are horrific. Their nominal rates are negative, but they have deflation in Japan. So real interest rates are absolutely profoundly the most negative in the United States of America, and that's why the dollar was overbought. It went overbought to 94 in anticipation of rate rises in nominal terms that aren't coming, and that's why the dollar could be going back to 80, and if you get that trade right, you're going to make a lot of money.
I think you said on the last time or time before that, you said they're one and done. They're not going to do that. They're not going to go up. Maybe one. I don't think so. You were saying that they just are going to be in a situation where they're forced not to raise rates. Is the Federal Reserve done until at least after the November election? Are they done raising rates?
Well, they were supposed to raise rates, Greg, 4 times in 2016. Do you know what number they're up to now? 0. They cannot get off the zero-bound range, and I'll tell you this is a great fact for your audience, and they'll probably only get it here at USA Watchdog. We have a debt-to-GDP ratio that's well over 100%, but the total debt of the world is 230% debt to GDP, up $60 trillion since 2007. But here's the data point that you're only going to get here. Do you know our debt is growing at 3.44 times GDP? That has never happened before. You can go to the Z1. That is a Federal Reserve document. Look it up for yourself. If you look in 2015, our debt in the United States was rising at 3.44x GDP. That is astronomical. That's added as accretive to the $19.2 trillion we already have. We are Puerto Rico. We are Japan. All we have is the central bank. If the Fed ever started to raise interest rates, our debt would become unserviceable, interest rates would go back towards double digits very quickly, and the economy would implode. And that's why you're not going to get probably any more interest rate increases in 2016, maybe one at the most, and that's why the dollar is going lower.
Yeah, do you think they're hyperinflating the currency as we speak? They don't need to change the laws. Somebody said that, I think I had Alistair McLeod on says, and John Williams says the same thing, and I bet you say the same thing, is that they've already printed enough money to where once this gets into the system, John Williams says it's $16 trillion held outside the country. Go ahead. Do you think...
We have enough run hyperbolic. Now, we have plenty of excess reserves. You know, I got to tell you, we've already achieved our inflation target. If you look at core CPI, we're already up 2.2% year over year. We already have our inflation target. In fact, if you want to be honest, we already have a condition, much like the 70s, of stagflation. That's what we've got.
Do you think that this is a reflection, the weak dollar is a reflection of gasoline prices and oil prices going up all of a sudden? So oil's in the mid-40s. Gasoline prices are heading back up. This is a function of a weak dollar, not oversupply.
Hey Greg, didn't you have like a plethora, maybe 100 million people on CNBC tell us that the lower gas prices were great for the economy? Well, now they're telling us that the higher gas prices are wonderful because it shows strength. You know, everything's always rosy and dandy. I'll tell you what's indicative of the market. This is what inflation is. It's when the market loses faith in a currency's purchasing power, and that's exactly we've engendered from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve promised that we were on the road to recovery. They said we would be growing at 3%. We're growing at 0%. They said they can raise interest rates and normalize the Fed funds rate. They can't do it. The dollar index rose to 94, actually to 100, on the belief that this was going to be the case. And it's absolutely not the truth. And that's why the market is losing faith in the value of the dollar. That's why inflation is well north of 2% now. And if you look at the prices paid in medical services, in healthcare costs, in education, and even fuel now, yes, we are in a condition of stagflation. Make no mistake about it.
Do you think that this meeting at the White House with the Federal Reserve and the president and vice president had to do with the dollar? Is that what you think? I mean, all of a sudden you're hearing these rumblings that...
Well, I think what happened was we decided that we were not going to raise interest rates because raising rate, in light of the fact that Japan and Europe is in massive easing mode, that would have caused the dollar to break way north of 100. That would have crushed foreign reported earnings of multinational companies, and they realized that all of these foreign bondholders, the foreign bondholders of dollar-denominated debt, they would be in massive default, and that means banks would be bailed out on a global scale. They would have to be bailed out. So they made an accord that the Fed would not raise interest rates. But guess what? crumbling your currency hasn't really worked. Look, Japan has tried it since Abenomics came in December 2012, and they're in a perpetual recession. You can't grow your economy by wrecking your currency. And I'll tell you this, Greg, I want to touch on this before the interview is over, and I hope we have enough time. You know, S&P 500 earnings, the reason why we're worried about a recession in the United States is the fact that a recession would make earnings negative. Guess what? We've had 4 quarters in a row of negative earnings growth and 5 quarters in a row of falling year-over-year revenue growth. We are already in a recession as far as earnings and revenue growth are concerned.
Why gold and silver then? Why has all of a sudden taken off? This is part of the reason the Shanghai gold exchange? Is it because Deutsche Bank got had to come out and admit it was rigging the gold and silver market along with other primary dealers, Bank of Nova Scotia and HSBC, and I'm sure other ones, as my guests say? Is why gold and silver? Why all of a sudden, boom, they've been uncorked?
Well, I can tell you. The real reason why is that the market is becoming aware that the Federal Reserve cannot raise interest rates, and the market on a global basis is losing faith in global central banks. You know, I said it on your program several interviews ago. I said eventually we would be in this condition. The market would lose credibility and faith in central banks to save the economy. That's exactly where we are. And the only currency in the world, the only money in the world that anybody can really trust is gold. That's the way it's been for thousands of years. I'll make a prediction that in the near future, I'm not talking about decades from now, a few years from now, we will eschew all fiat currencies and have money. As Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution dictates, all money will be backed by gold and or silver. That's the way our founding fathers wanted it, and that's the way it will be once again.
Do you think that that what's going on in the gold and silver market, do you think the suppression game is over, or do you think it's going to continue until the lawsuits take everybody down? I mean, or do you think the suppression game's over?
I think gold is a manipulated asset. I think every asset is a manipulated asset, can be manipulated down and up. You know, for years gold was manipulated up. And, you know, people wanted gold to go up from 2002 to really 2012. It was straight up, except for a little blip in 2008. I think these nefarious people who work on Wall Street want to make money. And they can make money either way. They can make money when gold goes down. They can make money when gold goes up. And the horrible, horrific, nefarious, the personification of evil, Goldman Sachs, when they finally admit that they cannot manipulate gold any longer because everybody else on the street wants it to go higher, they're going to throw in the towel, and I think gold eventually goes to $1,500. And I think it could happen in the next, I would say, 16 months.
You think gold goes to $1,500?
$1,500 an ounce in the next 16 months.
Oh, that's pretty conservative. A lot of people would say, wow, some people think it's going to go to $10,000 an ounce.
I think it's going to $10,000 an ounce eventually, but I'm talking about in the next year and a half, $1,500. That's a huge move from $1,300 where it is today. That's very significant. I'll take that. Gold mining shares have been huge winners for us. And now when I say $1,500, I'm being conservative. I think that could be a floor for where gold's going to be in about 12 to 16 months. Absolutely.
Do you think the dollar could just go into free fall?
I think the dollar, as I said, I'm not a technical analyst, but you look at where it went from 80 to 100, held 94 6 times in a year, broke that. The next level of support is back to 80. If you go back to 80, you could very well see gold back to where it's, back to $1,800, $1,900 an ounce. And if that's the case, then, you better own some gold mining shares. Absolutely. I got to tell you, I want one more data point because, we're data, it's not just my opinion, data heavy. You look at China's PMI manufacturing data, that shrank 14 months in a row. The world is in stagflation. Central banks vying for inflation targets. This is going to end in disaster. Look what's going on in Japan, 1,100 points in just two trading days. Look what's going on in the United States, no growth anywhere in the world. And we're headed towards, and you said it, and I agree, helicopter money. If we get helicopter money in the next year, then forget about $1,500 gold. You're talking about $5,000 gold. So what am I saying? You got to eschew fiat currencies. You have to own precious metals. At Pento, we have 25% to 30% in precious metal mining shares. That's our portfolio, and that's why we're crushing the S&P so far in 2016.
Do you think that China could cause a calamity, that China could crash, that the U.S. and China may go after each other, financial warfare? Do you think they could try to push the U.S. down, that the U.S. could crash, that the markets could crash? A lot of people are worried about the crash scenario in the world right here and right now. What do you say about that?
I think we're going to have a global synchronized collapse amongst the developed world economies, Europe, Japan, the United States, and China. And that's why I think you should be also hedging against this market's downturn. Now, don't forget, we have the most overvalued, most dangerous stock market in the history of the world. If you look at total market cap to GDP, if you look at price to sales, if you look at median PE ratios, those record valuations sit on top of an almost unprecedented earnings and revenue recession. The only thing we have left is the promise of ZIRP, QQE, QE, and negative interest rates that don't work. All they do is inflate asset prices. Watch out. You should be short the market, and you should be long precious metals. And I think in that manner, at least a certain portion of your assets, you'll be protected.
What you said was that there was a bubble in central bank confidence. That was it. I believe that was the phrase, pretty close to it. That you said the biggest bubble was in central bank confidence, and it looks like that bubble is popping, my friend.
Thank God. Thank the world. And you know something, Greg? It's not that I want chaos and confusion and debacles. I want us to return to a real economy as fast as possible. And the faster we get there, the less pain that will be endured. That's what I really want. That's what you want. That's what we're here for. We're here for good. We're not here to promote and promulgate evil. We're here to promote good. And the faster we return to letting markets dictate the price of currencies and interest rates and real estate and equities, the better off we'll all be. It's going to be painful, but we better get on that road sooner rather than later, or we're all going to look like Puerto Rico in the very near future.
Michael Pento, Pento Portfolio Strategies. He is the author of this book, The Coming Bond Market Collapse. You can find it on the homepage of his website. Just scroll down. It lays out the unfolding collapse that is happening right now. We talked about Puerto Rico, and he talks about all the problems in the bond market. Michael Pento, thanks for coming on with all your data points and giving us a great economic update. Michael Pento, Pento Portfolio Strategies. Thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks so much for having me back, Greg.